You remember FarmVille, right? All those little crops and notifications flooding your Facebook feed. Well, the story of the company behind it, Zynga, is a wild ride. We're talking ruthless tactics, billion-dollar deals, and one of the most polarizing founders Silicon Valley has ever seen. So let's get into it. So let's start with this number, $12.7 billion. In 2022, Take-Two Interactive, the folks behind Grand Theft Auto, bought Zynga for that much. Now, for most people, this was just shocking. A company that felt like a distant memory from a decade ago was suddenly worth a fortune. And that brings us to the big question we're going to unpack. How on earth did the company that spammed all of us back in 2009 manage to land one of the biggest paydays in video game history? Well, the answer really comes down to one person, a very particular kind of founder. All right, let's meet the man at the center of this whole thing, Mark Pincus. This was not your typical tech CEO. No, he was basically a lightning rod for controversy, a guy who pretty much loved his reputation as the bad boy of Silicon Valley. I mean, this guy's reputation was something else. People called him a control freak. Investors said he was not coachable. He was so aggressive, he was actually featured in a book called Mean Men. You know, from a really young age, he just hated authority and hated the idea of a normal job. And that mindset, it defined his entire career. So to really get Zynga, you have to get what drove this guy. He got fired from a venture capital firm when he was just 28, and he felt like he was totally washed up. That experience just lit a fire under him. He wasn't just building another company, he was building a fortress, making absolutely sure no one could ever take away his control again. And this quote, this says it all. He once told a group of students, flat out, that he did every horrible thing in the book just to make money fast. For Mark Pincus, this wasn't really about ethics. It was about survival. It was about winning. And that philosophy became the DNA of Zynga. So how do you turn a mindset like that into a billion-dollar company? Well, Pincus built what you could call the Zynga playbook. It was based on three incredibly powerful and, yeah, pretty controversial pillars: using data, cloning other games, and basically engineering addiction. It all really kicked off with Zynga Poker. Now, today we're all used to buying stuff inside of games, right? But back then, this was revolutionary. Zynga pioneered microtransactions in the West, getting millions of people to pay real money for fake poker chips. And, oh man, was it profitable. But here's the real secret sauce. The games were almost a sideshow. The real business was data. One employee famously said Zynga was an analytics company disguised as a games company. They tracked every single click you made, analyzing your behavior not just to make the games better, but to figure out how to exploit your habits and keep you playing and paying. And FarmVille's core gameplay loop is just a perfect example of this psychological engineering. It was so simple, but so effective. You plant your crops, but then you have to wait in real-world time for them to grow. If you don't log back in on time to harvest them, they wither and die. That little bit of anxiety, that fear of missing out, that's what turned a simple game into a daily chore for millions of people. And then, of course, there was the cloning. Let's be honest, Pincus's strategy was simple. Find a game that's working, copy it, and then use our fire hose of data and marketing to make it bigger. They did it over and over. They saw Farmtown, they made FarmVille. They saw Mob Wars, they made Mafia Wars. And because of their data advantage, their clones almost always crushed the smaller, original games. It was brutal. Okay, so you have these super addictive games and a cloning machine, but how do you get them in front of hundreds of millions of people? Well, you turn to a marketing strategy that was part brilliant, part totally bizarre, and part, well, deeply sketchy. You really can't make this stuff up. They teamed up with Lady Gaga to create Gagaville to promote her new album. They had Snoop Dogg literally blow up an armored truck in the desert. They unleashed 100 zombies on the streets of New York. They even brought actual herds of sheep into Manhattan to promote FarmVille. It was just pure spectacle. But then there was the dark side. It was called the offer wall. It looked like a great deal for players. Complete these offers and get free in-game money. The catch: completing an offer often meant signing up for sketchy credit card subscriptions or giving away your personal data to scammers without even realizing it. And the wildest part is Pincus wasn't even hiding it. He openly talked about one of their scams, a downloadable toolbar that gave you poker chips. His words, "I couldn't get rid of it." He knew it was basically malware. Unsurprisingly, they got hit with lawsuits, and Facebook eventually had to step in and shut these practices down. For a few years there, Zynga looked absolutely unstoppable. They were the kings of Facebook gaming. But the very things that made them grow so fast, the Facebook spam, the questionable tactics, were also the seeds of their downfall. The whole empire was about to come crashing down. So here's how it all fell apart. And it happened fast. In 2011, they had this massive IPO. But in 2012, two things happened. First, Facebook went public and decided to clean up its platform, turning off the notification spam that Zynga depended on. At the exact same time, the entire world was moving from desktop computers to mobile phones, and Zynga completely missed it. The stock tanked, Pincus had to step down, and eventually the original FarmVille was just gone. The stock price just tells the whole story. It went public at $10 a share and then just plummeted to under $3. It got so bad that at one point, their fancy San Francisco headquarters was worth more than the entire company. What a spectacular fall from grace. But just when everyone had written Zynga off, when it seemed like it was game over, the story took one last, completely unbelievable turn. With Pincus no longer the CEO, the new leadership did the one thing the company should have done years ago. They went all in on mobile games. And they made a really smart move, buying an ad tech company, which basically doubled down on their old playbook of using data to dominate. And it worked. The pivot brought Zynga back from the dead. It repositioned them as a giant, not in Facebook gaming, but in mobile gaming. Which brings us right back to that insane number from the beginning. When Take-Two bought them for $12.7 billion, they weren't buying a failure. They were buying a comeback story. And here it is, the final irony. The most incredible part of this whole story. Mark Pincus, the guy who did every horrible thing, who missed the biggest shift in gaming, who ran the company into the ground and was forced out, was still one of the biggest shareholders. He walked away from that deal with a massive payday. He won. Years later, looking back, Pincus said something pretty interesting. He admitted his total obsession with data had a huge blind spot. The one thing he couldn't measure, the thing he couldn't teach, was intuition. And that's what made him miss the shift to mobile. For a guy who built an empire on numbers, that's a pretty huge omission. So, what do we make of all this? The story of Zynga really leaves us with a tough question. In this super cutthroat world of Silicon Valley, who actually comes out on top? Is it the brilliant visionaries with amazing new ideas? Or is it the villains, the ones who are willing to do whatever it takes to win?